डॉक्टर सविता नमस्कार।
नमस्कार सर।
आप कैसे हैं मैम?
All good sir, how are you?
We are fine ma'am, thank you. Shall we move ma'am? Ranjay is preparing your slides that will be ready within moments, and we can move now. Dear teachers, now to address next session on sculpture and architectural heritage of India with special reference to temple art, we are very happy to introduce one of very noted and young scholar, Dr. Savita Kumari. Currently, ma'am is working as an associate professor in the Department of History of Art at National Museum Institute of History of Art, Conservation and Museology in New Delhi. She has been engaged in research and teaching since 2006. Dr. Savita has coordinated several national and international conferences, seminars, workshops, capacity building programs, exhibitions, and field visits. At present, she is engaged in the art history enrichment program for state school teachers and students. She also worked as one of the core members in a collaborative project Cham Sculptures from Vietnam and its interface with the Indian art, where she published a research catalog of 50 sculptures from collection of Da Nang Museum of Cham Sculpture, Vietnam. She has also worked as assistant curator in the National Gallery of Modern Art, that is called NGMA, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And she was associated with Indira Gandhi National Center for Art in executive position. She has awarded various prestigious national and international scholarships and fellowships. The important fellowships are Indian Council of Historical Research ICHR Fellowship, Charles Wallace India Trust Grant for Research and Visit UK, Nehru Trust for Indian Collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She received CAA Getty International Travel Grant to participate in College Art Association in annual conference in New York. She was awarded Getty Travel Grant for attending the CIMAMS 2014 at Doha, Qatar on museums in progress in public interest. Her area of specialization is on the art of South and Southeast Asia. She has authored many books and several research papers in the field of art history. And since long back, she associated as resource person with the CCRT. Thank you so much, Dr. Savita, being with us. And we received the deputation of more than 200 teachers from all directions, ma'am. These are teacher participants from more than 10 Indian states. On behalf of this learned team and CCRT, we heartily welcome you. Thank you, teachers, and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for the generous introduction. Good morning to everyone. And I'm grateful to CCRT for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on sculptural and architectural heritage of India. And it's a great privilege for me to speak to such a wonderful group of teachers. Teachers are the foundation, they lay the foundation of the nation. So teachers are the most important community in the country, and I pay my respect to all of you and thank you for taking out time for this lecture. So now we should start with the topic, because we are going to cover quite a lot, several centuries in 1.5 hours. So, sir, if you permit, may I start with the presentation?
Yeah, please. Go ahead, ma'am. Thank you.
Many thanks. Many thanks. Can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am. Slides are clear.
Yeah. All right. So today we are going to discuss on some of the most well-known temples in the country, and a few of them are also the World Heritage Sites. So all of us, whatever be our discipline, maybe you are teachers from science background or English literature or Hindi, and some maybe from humanities as well. But the topic is actually pertinent to everyone, because it gives you a better understanding of the architectural and sculptural tradition of India, its various lifestyles. Because previously we had these sculptures are also source of the source and the primary information on how the world, the country was around 5th to 11th century CE. So let us start with the temple architecture, and primarily my sculptures are also coming from the temple buildings. So I'm going to begin with the very concept of the temple. You may have heard of some very important temples like, Sun Temple at Konark or Khajuraho temples, but temples before reaching to that stage pass through many stages of development. So let us start with the concept. What exactly a temple symbolizes? What is its meaning? Why it is so valuable for a particular community? So let's begin with the concept. So every religion has some concept regarding the birth of the universe. And here I would like to share you a mythology associated with Hindu religion. So it was believed that originally in this universe there was nothing. It was completely dark, and the darkness got impregnant with a golden egg. And that egg, due to some cosmic activities, it was divided into two parts. The upper part became the heaven, and the lower part became the earth. And in between, Lord Indra stood as the cosmic pillar, thus separating the earth from the heaven, and the area between the two came to be known as Antariksha. So in a way, you can find out from this story that actually the temple is a representation of universe. And this is what we are going to see when we look into the sculptural representation on the body of the temple, which symbolizes universe. Now, how these temples were made? These temples were made according to canons prescribed in Shilpa Shastras. Architects were not free to make a building the way they wanted to. They had to follow the rules which were in the Shilpa texts. So you should know, like, how do we know the method of constructing a temple? And we know about them through certain texts. And there are many texts across India. Each region has got its own unique style. But here I will talk about some very important texts. And these are Mandan's Vastu Shastra, Bhuvan Dev's Aparajita Prich, it dates back to 11th century. Then Samrangan Sutradhar. You may have heard of Raja Bhoj. He was a very popular king, and he himself was a great architect and writer. So he wrote this book, Samrangan Sutradhar, which gives us a lot of information on the method of constructing a temple. Then we have works like Vishwakarma Prakash and Maya Mata. Maya Mata deals with South Indian temple architecture, whereas Samrangan Sutradhar is primarily in North Indian, it talks about North Indian styles. Now, making of the temple was not a very simple process. These texts talks about even the selection of the site, and the sites where temple was built was selected after a great scientific examination of the soil. So for instance, I'm just giving you some example, like, it was written that what should be the color of the soil. if it's very dark, it may not be used to construct the building. Then it talks about like how much water the soil absorbs. So the architect would first dig a structure, a tank on the site, and then it was filled with water. So if the site absorbs water completely, it was considered to be as a bad land. If it is considered to be, if it absorbs half of the water, still it was not that good. But the site which allows water, it does not absorb the water completely, that is considered to be as the best quality of water. Similarly, it was tested for the smell. So if the soil smells like, it is said like if it smells like a bone or like, sewage, it should not be used. It should have smell of a sandalwood or different types of woods which is considered to be auspicious. Similarly, oxygen is tested in the land. So in the tank, they would keep the lamp, and if the lamp is not burning, then it is not considered to be an appropriate place to construct a temple. So even the selection of the site was a great process. It's not like today, we go and buy a land and start building structure. This whole process would took a couple of years. And after the site was selected, then it was several crops were yielded on the site to test its fertility. That was very, very important. Now, you may have heard of this Vastu Purush. Even today, we see like if the Vastu of the place is all right or not. So how did it come in being actually? What is this Vastu? Vastu. So this Vastu is actually the cosmic man. Initially, it was believed that as I told you, one of the stories was in the darkness, a huge form emerged, and the gods and the demons both were surprised, like what this thing is, and it was increasing in size continuously. Its size was increasing. So the gods and the demons, they teamed together and they put this man on the floor. So this is a position, you can look into this diagram. This is a position in which this brought the supine position in which this huge cosmic man was brought to earth. And here you will see that different deities, different gods and goddesses, as well as a demon, occupies various part of the body of this Vastu Purush. And there was an agreement between the gods and the Vastu Purush that whenever there was a construction, the Vastu Purush would be given the first offering, and he would be consecrated. So before making any construction, even today, we venerate this Vastu Purush. Now, the body of the temple is equated with the body of this Vastu Purush. So when you look into a temple building, it has primarily three main parts. The base of the temple is considered to be the foot part, the wall, the jangha or the thigh, and spire is considered as the head or mastak or shikhar of this Vastu Purush. So we have relationship between the body of the cosmic man and the body of the temple. Now, so India is a huge country, and all of you have come from different parts, and you may notice that like every part has got its own style, its own way of dressing and eating, and similarly we see the variation in different parts also in the form of the temple. So primarily, according to the Silpa text, we divide the temple style in three parts: Nagar, which is North Indian temple style; Dravid, which is South Indian temple styles; and Vesar or Besara temple, which is principles in the middle region, primarily in the Deccan region. We find this kind of temple where we have elements from both northern and southern styles, and we get an hybrid style. So let us start with the Nagar style of temples. Nagar style of temples, the earliest still evidence we get from Gupta period. But I would like to tell you, and this temple is dates back to 4th century AD. But please note that temple existed before 4th century as well. And how do we know about the existence of the temple? We have sources which talks about various temples in different parts of the country. Then also on Buddhist buildings, we have from earlier period, like one example is Sanchi Stoop and Bharut Stoop. So there you will see representation of the temple on in the form of sculpture. So when we look into those sculptures, it tells us that originally there was some sort of temple which existed before this period. We have temple building information as early as from 2nd century BC. So these are various styles of the temple. Like initially you can see these temples were very small, like a village hut, and around it was a balustrade to protect it from animals and keep it away from the day-to-day life activities. So here is Sanchi. This temple is called Sanchi temple number 17. And look at this temple. It has got only two components. One is the Garbhagriha, which is a square structure, and you can look, the walls are plain. But as we move ahead in time, the temples will be much more decorated. Only decoration which we see here are on the pillars, and this part is called mandap. And mandap is meant for the devotees to gather and protect themselves from heat and rain. So when you look into these pillars, it's very much like similar to what we have seen even earlier period, like a lot of Ashokan pillars were there. So like it is more evolved, but if you look into the crowning element, it has got 4 adorned lions, which we also see in the modern pillar style. So the tradition, what I wanted to tell you is that the tradition existed before Sanchi temple number 17 also, but we don't have any evidence. They no more survive. From Gupta period only, we also have a evolved temple, and this temple is from 6th century. This is called Vishnu temple from Devgarh. Now, when you look at this temple and compare it with the previous temple we had a Garbhagriha where the main image of deity is kept, and then a mandap, 2 component. But when you look at Devgarh temple, you see it is more elaborate, it is bigger in size, and we are getting some very interesting features incorporated in the temple building. So here, look into this temple. It's on a high platform. You can see it's on a high platform. And then in the center of this platform is a temple. This temple faces west. Also, when you look into the wall of this temple, can you see here now there are niches. We have niches, and which will hold sculptures. Whereas when you go to Sanchi, look at the Sanchi temple, the walls were plain. This is 4th century, but now we are progressing in time. And now you look at the temples, the walls are provided with niches, and these niches will have beautiful sculptures. Also, can you see the plan here? Here we have 4 squares in the corners. It means that apart from the main temple, there also existed 4 smaller temples. So how many temples we have in total? We have in total 5 temples. So when you see a group of 5 temples together, there is a typical name for it. This type of temple is called Panchayatan temple. And in the main temple, the most important deity is placed, and other temples, the smaller temples are dedicated to Parivar Devatas. That is the deities which relate to the main deities. So we have other deities housed in these smaller shrines. But today, when you look at the Devgarh temple, it's in bad state of preservation. All these smaller temples have gone, and also when you look at the shikhar, that is superstructure of this temple. We talked about the superstructure. This is also missing. This part is also broken. So with time, we see there are damage to the building, but we are fortunate that our sculptures are still in place. So you can have a look at this. We have beautiful sculpture on the Devgarh temple on the 3 walls. The western side is the gate, which leads you inside the temple chamber, and on all other sides we have the sculptural representation. So we have here the image of, if you know this story, it's called Gajendra Moksha. So there was a story that once there was an elephant king. He was very powerful, but he was also arrogant about his power. So Nagas, when he went one day, he went to the waters, and the Naga king, the snake god, captured him. And then the elephant was trapped. He was proud of his might and power, but then he could not save himself from the Nagas. So what he does, he prays to Lord Vishnu. And you can see here, Lord Vishnu. Vishnu is one of the very important gods in Hindu pantheon. So here you will see Vishnu is coming to rescue the elephant king Gajendra, and he is seated on his mount, his vehicle Garud. Then you see the next slide, which is on the eastern wall or eastern Janga. I told you wall is called Janga. So here, this is a very interesting story again. You can see artists had tried to show the hermitage of Badrinath. And here, Vishnu, in the form of Narayan, is practicing penance. He is doing tap along with Nar, that is Arjun. So here, Nar and Narayan are practicing meditation in the hermitage of Badrinath. What is interesting here is that you can look into the these are the beauties of Indian art. You can see here there is a lion and there are also deer, and they are staying together. So idea is that when you have you have like good leadership on Nara and Narayan together, the wildness of the creature lives in harmony. But I would also like to share with you a very important episode here. If you know Hindu god Indra, he is the king of heaven, and he always gets scared. If somebody practices penance, and he thinks that if somebody is better than him, then he can become the king of the heaven. So when he saw Vishnu, Nara and Narayan practicing penance, he sends his beautiful apsaras, the damsels, to enchant and disturb their penance. But what happened, because he did not know, Indra did not know that he is Narayan himself. So what Vishnu did, he took a grass and drew a figure of women on his thigh. And from that is born Urvashi. And here is Urvashi. There is a beautiful lady who is shown with folded hands. She is praying to Vishnu. So when Urvashi was born, other Apsaras felt jealous and they ran away. Indra realized his mistakes, and ultimately Narayan gifted Urvashi to Indra. So here is a very important idea. Who is the first artist? You need to notice. Here the first teacher of drawing is none but Vishnu, the great God himself. So remember that in Indian art, art is considered a sacred activity. It's not like anyone does art, but here Narayan himself is the first painter. And similarly, the Lord of Dance is Shiva himself. So art is considered to be as a sacred activity in Hinduism. Then there is this third sculpture on the wall of the temple. And here you see the representation of Anant Shayan Vishnu. Here Vishnu is reclining on his cosmic serpent Anant. And you can see this is the episode of the birth of Brahma. Here Brahma is born out of the navel of Lord Vishnu. So creation is taking place now. In Hinduism, it is believed that Brahma has created the world. So here creator is being created. The three beautiful sculptures were shown on the walls of the temple. Now we come to the door. So I told you like the temple has four sides. So on the three sides we have sculptures, and on the fourth side we have this beautiful doorway. And in Hindu temple architecture, the doors are beautifully decorated because it is believed to mark the transition from mundane to the divine world. So when the devotee crosses the threshold, actually he is entering into a sacred space, which is divine. So there are many components to it. Since we don't have time, I will talk about a few things, few sculptures on the doorway. Now, on the top, we have representation of river goddesses Ganga and Yamuna. How do we find Ganga? Ganga stands on a Makar Vahan and Yamuna stand on a tortoise. Now, why they are on the door frame? They are there so that the sacred, so that they can purify the devotee before he or she enters into the sacred space. So devotee is symbolically purified before entering to the sacred space. And then this sculpture is very, very important. Here we have image of Vishnu seated on Anant, the cosmic serpent Anant. Now this is again a very important representation because you can see here this sculpture gives us the idea to which deity the temple belongs. Today, there is no sculpture inside the Sanctum Sanctorum. Inside, there is no sculpture. So how would you know that this temple belongs to which deity? We know it through the image on the Lalat Bim. This is called Lalat Bim. Like you have a forehead, the center of the forehead, it is compared with that. So Lalat is the term used in Hindi for the forehead. So here is the image of Vishnu on Lalat Bim. So we know that this temple was dedicated to Lord Vishnu. Now from Uttar Pradesh, I am taking you to Rajasthan. And Rajasthan, we have this very important group of temple in Ossian village. And here you see a better preserved Panchayatan style of temple. I told you that this temple is called Panchayatan. Why? Because it has got group of 5 temples. Here we could not see it, but in Rajasthan you can see it. You can see the temple again stands on a high plinth, and on all 4 corners there were miniature temples. The main temple is in the center. Again, wall of this temple is beautifully decorated with sculpture. But look at the plan now. If you remember, in Deoghar temple, the temple which we have seen in Uttar Pradesh, we had only 3 sculptures in the cardinal direction, in the center of each wall, only 3 sculptures. But as the style evolves and we progress in time, that is now we are in 8th century. Earlier we were in 6th century, now we have crossed 200 years. temple also becomes highly elaborate. So now there is not only one sculpture on the wall in the middle, but there are also other sculptures flanking the central sculpture. So on each side of the wall, we have a group of 5 sculptures. And also here at Rajasthan, you can clearly see the division in different parts. So the lower part is the base, the middle part is Jangha, and the upper part is Mastak or Shikhar. And how the Jangha or the wall is separated from Shikhar? By a molding called Varandika. Can you see this belt-like structure between the lower wall and the superstructure? This is also decorated with beautiful sculpture related to the life of Lord Krishna. So gradually temple is becoming more and more complex in its appearance. Here still you can understand different parts, but further the architecture becomes more complicated. So let us see some of the sculptures on the walls of this temple. So here, remember that the corners of the temples, it is believed that temple needs to be protected. All direction of the temple needs to be protected by different deities, and these deities are called Dikpal. Dikpal protects various directions. So on the eastern side, we have Ishan. Then Ishan is a form of Lord Shiv. So his iconography, when you look into his features, he holds a trident, his hair are in matted locks, he wears a skull garland, he has snakes. So he is a form of Ishan. Then we have representation of Harihar. Harihar is a composite form where Shiv and Vishnu are united together in one body. So you can see the difference. Now this is Vishnu, and Vishnu is the king. So he wears a crown. So half of the hair is covered by a crown. But on the other side, on the right side, is of Shiva. And Shiva is a yogi. So he is shown with Jata Mukut. There are matted locks here. Similarly, artists try to distinguish between the two aspects of Vishnu and Shiv by their weapon. So we know like Vishnu holds a chakra, whereas Shiv holds a trishul, a trident. So these are the features which helps us identify the deity, their weapons and also their mounts. Now look at this sculpture, and this is Indra. And how we identify him as Indra? Because Indra's vehicle or Vahan is an elephant. So today we have like cars and scooters or metros, but here you'll see like different gods and goddesses were given animals as their mount. Then this is another very interesting sculpture which we frequently see in Ocean group of temples, and this is the representation of Trivikram form of Vishnu. And in this form, you'll see that one of the legs of Vishnu is stretched. So this is how we identify him. And in this form, if you know this story, there was a story that once there was a demon king called Bali. He was very generous, and he was known for his ability, for his philanthropic activities. So what happened again? I told you like Indra gets frightened. So Indra got frightened, and Indra is also a friend of Vishnu. So he goes to Lord Vishnu saying that maybe Bali is a very good king, but since he belonged to the demon family, it is very important to protect the world from the demons, because they will end up in destruction as it was in their nature. So Vishnu goes to Bali in the form of a Brahmin, and he asked for 3 steps of land. So Bali was a great king. He said like, okay, you take it. Though his teacher Shukracharya. Bali had a teacher, Shukracharya, and he could see Vishnu's trick. He knew that this small Brahmin is none other than Vishnu himself, and he asked Bali to not give the promise. But Bali was a great king, and he said, when Vishnu has come as himself has come, the king of the world universe has come to ask for a boon, why should I not give? This is an opportunity for me. So Vishnu asked for 3 steps of land. And in the first step, Vishnu measures the earth. In the second, he measures the entire universe. But where to put his third step? Because he was promised 3 steps of land. So the generous demon king offered his own head. So here we see the final episode of the story where Vishnu is putting his foot on the head of demon king Bali. Similarly, there are many sculptures. I'm not going into detail of all the sculptures, but look into this one. This is Agni, the fire god, and how we identify him? We identify him with the flames, which is behind his body, and also he has a mount which is ram. It's not very clear here, but his mount is a ram. Then I told you about the Varandika. This is Varandika. This is the level which separates wall from the superstructure. And on Varandika, we see beautiful depiction of Krishna Leela. So here is an episode. You can see here Vasudev has reached Vrindavan and he is offering Balakrishna to Nand. And before that, we see Yashoda was sleeping and Vasudev took Krishna so that it can be handed over to his friend. And he should be protected by the demon king, Kans. Then, like Vishnu temple at Devghar, the door of this temple is also beautifully decorated. Decoration becomes much more complex, but a change that took place in this temple was that previously in Gupta period, you will see river goddesses are shown on the top. They are on the upper part of the door frame. But later on, we see river goddesses coming to the lower part. So here again, this is Ganga on her Makar Vahan and the other one is Yamuna on our tortoise Vahan. From Rajasthan, in the Western India, now let me take you to Orissa. And Orissa's temple, this temple is dates back to 7th century. And you can look into the various parts. So in terms of plan, it is very simple. You have a Garbhagriha where image of deity is placed and it is preceded by a mandap. Now, again, you can see here the temple has got several projections. Different part of the temple has got different terms. It means the same. Here also we have 3 main parts. You know, you have the base, then you have Janga, and then you have Mastak, that is the Shikhar. But in Orissa, because we have different languages in different regions, so the terminology is different. So in Orissa, the base and wall is called Bad. The superstructure or the spire is called Gandhi, and finally the topmost part which crowns the Shikhar is called Mastak. And Mastak is usually in North Indian temple is an Amla Sarak, and Amla Sarak is what, you know, like the gooseberry Avla fruit which we all eat and it's full of benefits. So it is that Avla which is shown as the crowning element of the temple building. Now, look into the sculpture of this temple. Stylistically, it's very different. And also, since this temple belonged to Shiva, so you will see sculptures are related to Shiva and his family primarily. So here on the eastern side, we have image of Kartikeya. Then we have, how we identify Kartikeya? We identify Kartikeya by his peacock Vahan, and he also holds a spear in his hand. Then we have Ganesh. All of you would be familiar with Ganesh. His face is that of an elephant. The northern niche has no sculpture, but we think that it probably belonged to Parvati. However, we don't have the sculpture at present. Now, when you look at this sculpture here on the western side, which is the main side, which is the entrance side, we see here the representation of Ravan shaking Mount Kailash. If you know the story that Ravan was a great he was a very powerful king. So once Shiva and Parvati was taking rest in their mountain abode in Himalayas, Ravan shook the mountains. So what Shiva did with his toe, he captured Ravan, and it is believed to be for thousands of years. So Ravan composed hymns in praise of Lord Shiva, and then Lord Shiva grants him the boon that nobody would ever be able to kill him, and he becomes very, very powerful. So you look into this episode, and this is the beauty of Lord Shiva, and today is the day dedicated to Shiva also. So here you can see Lord Shiva is the only deity who is being worshipped both by he is being worshipped both by the devas, the gods, and also the demons, and he instantly grant the boon. So in Orissa we have found many temples dedicated to Lord Shiva, and above that is the image of Nataraj. I will talk about its symbolism later on, but here is Shiva dancing in the form of Nataraj. Then we have few other sculptures, and this sculpture is very interesting. This is of Lakulish, and Lakulish is a Shavite teacher. And when we see this form of Shiva, it is like it's a form of Shiva where he is shown with two arms and as a teacher. So we know that this temple belongs to Pasupata sect of Shaivism. So this is very interesting because you can see, these sculptures tells you a lot about the region, about the belief of the patron. Like we know that, the patron must be a follower of Lord Shiva, and that's why he created a Shiva temple. Then in Shaivism also we have many sects. So since we have the image of Lakulish here, we know that this particular temple was dedicated to Pasupat form of Shaivism. And then I'm taking you to another sculpture. It has got beautiful sculpture, this temple, and this sculpture is called Kalyan Sundar. Kalyan Sundar is a form where Shiva is shown marrying Parvati. So we can see Shiva and Parvati getting married together. And finally, we have the image of Mahisasur Mardini. And you may be aware that the Dussehra festival is celebrated in veneration of goddess Mahisasur Mardini. So here Durga is is a form of Shakti. She is killing the demon Mahisasur. So we have a plethora of sculpture on the body of the temple. This is the early style of temple building in Orissa. I told you like this dates back to 7th century, but gradually Orissan temples become highly complex. And so far, whatever I have shown you, you see only two main buildings in a temple complex. One is the Garbhagriha and another is the Mandap. But now we see the number of mandaps are increasing. Earlier we had Garbhagriha and one mandap, but now we have more mandaps added to the temple building. And this shows that the rituals associated with temple building was also becoming more and more complex. And these buildings were dedicated to different functions. Previously temples were not merely the place of worship, but it was also educational institutions. You can see, like, different halls meant for different functions. So the first hall is considered to be as the Bhog Mandap. The second hall is Nritya Mandap, the hall for dancing. The third is Mahamandap, where devotee gathers together before he proceeds to Garbhagriha or Sanctum Sanctorum to offer his prayers to the main deity. And this temple is still in worship, so it's very difficult to get the photographs of the sculpture. So I'm moving to the next temple, which is a World Heritage Site. And you may have heard of this temple. This is called Sun Temple, and it is in Konark, Orissa. It dates back to 13th century, and we know the patron was King Narsimha Dev. He belonged to Ganga dynasty. So when you look at this temple, you see it's in bad state of preservation. It had two components here. One was Sanctum Sanctorum and the other was Jagmohan. But look at the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Garbhagriha, it no more exists. And the reason being the climatic condition of Orissa also, because it's very humid and salty, and the stone with which the temple was constructed was made of fragile material. So we are not left with the Garbhagriha, but we are left with the Mandap. And Mandap in Orissa is called Jagmohan. So you can see, like, the same thing has different terms in different regions of the country. And here we have also a Nata Mandir or dancing hall. So the dance again was a very sacred activity, and we had the temple served as the institution for imparting teaching in dancing also. So this was a separate building dedicated to dance to the art of dancing. Also, you notice, I mean, it's a slide, okay, but then you can see these human figures. And this gives you an idea of the scale of the temple. It's a huge temple. So look at it. I mean, the humans, like, they would be like approximately 5 feet in height, but at least the temple's base itself is 3 times higher than the human being. So it's a huge, very tall temple, enormous temple with each part of its body intricately carved. So again, when you look at the temple, it's in bad state of preservation. This hall also, the superstructure is no more in existence. It collapsed, but we still have some intricate carving which tells us the beauty of the complex. And again, I'm here to show you the scale. Look at the scale. So these sculptures are almost life size. They're huge sculptures, and primarily these sculptures are of dancers and musicians. You can see, like, somebody playing on drum or on veena, and then there are dancers, and the Alasya Kanyas, the beautiful damsels looking at themselves in the mirror. So intricately carved, each inch of the stone is beautifully carved. Not only that, and another very peculiar aspect of this temple is that it is in the form of a huge chariot. It's in the form of a rath. And the sun god, it is believed that he rides, his vehicle is a chariot. He rides a chariot driven by 7 horses. So, and those 7 horses probably symbolizes 7 days of the day. And this temple building has got 12 wheels, and each wheel probably symbolizes the month of the year. So there are 12 months, so 12 wheels are there. Now again here we see intricate carving on the wall. Even the spaces behind this wheel, which artist would have left uncarved, is not left uncarved. It's intricately carved, very beautifully done. Now, when you look at these sculptures, there are beautiful images of women and of the couple engaged in love making activities, and there are reasons behind it. And if you know the four goals of a Hindu life, it is believed that an Hindu should be should achieve these five purusharth, these four purusharth in his lifetime. That is dharma, which is spirituality, earth, which is economy. So it's not like that you leave everything and go to the forest for meditation. Rather, devotee was also encouraged to fulfill his mundane duties and encouraged to earn wealth. Then calm, which is like desire, and it is represented by erotic figures, and which is the third aim or purusharth of life. And finally, moksha. So dharma, artha, kama, moksha are the four purusharth which a devotee should aim at attaining during his lifetime. So this is what I wanted to show it to you. So like when you look at the platform, this platform is intricately carved, and have a look at this. So somehow all these four purusharthas are depicted also on the walls. You can see here the court of a king, and there is this procession going on. So the kings are going to conquer and attack another king. Then we see Nag and Naginis. And I told you that the body of the temple shows the entire universe. So here it is the Patal Lok, or the netherworld. And it is believed that the netherworld or the water world is being occupied by the Nag and Naginis. And they are auspicious motive. They symbolizes water. So they are given very important place in the temple building. Then we also see the couples. So they are representative of the third purusharth, which is the kam or desire, and the union of male and female leads to procreation. So this is how the life is sustained and continued. So the union is considered to be sacred, and you see many erotic sculpture being depicted on the walls of the temples. And then we are coming to the doorway. Now, remember the previous slides. I showed you doorway of Vishnu temple, then doorway of Ocean temple, and now look at the doorway. It is becoming more and more intricate and complicated. So we have a series of sculptures on the lower part of the wall. Then there are many shakhas, branches. Each branch of the door frame is decorated with different kind of motif. And since this temple is dedicated to sun god, so we have sculptures associated with sun deities. So the lower part, you can see the image of sun god himself. And how we identify him? Because he is standing on a chariot, and this chariot is being driven by 7 horses. Above that, we have sun god Sun Revantak, and he is shown riding the horse. And a masterpiece of Konark sculpture, one of the sun god sculpture, is in the National Museum. So if you have a chance, please have a look at the sculpture. So from Eastern India, now I will take you to the Central India. And here you may have heard of this temple. This is Khajuraho group of temples. We have evidences of 54 temples at the site. I'm taking one group of temple, which is Lakshman temple. It dates back to 954 CE. It's a dated temple, and it belongs to the reign of Chandela king Yashovarman. And when you look at this complex, again this temple complex, it is Panchayatan temple. Why Panchayatan? Because we have a group of 5 temples creating forming the main structure. Again, it is on a high platform. Now look at this temple. As we have seen in Orissa, the number of mandaps have increased. Earlier we had only two mandaps, but now we have a Mukha mandap, a mandap, Mahamandap, and then Garbhagriha. And the entire, all these mandapas, these small halls, there are many halls. And as we progress from outside to inside, the size of the hall increases. And also height of the hall increases. So you can look into this temple. So this is the height of the Mukha Mandap, and finally when you reach to the Garbhagriha, it becomes higher. So what happens in the profile of these shikhar of various mandap and Garbhagriha, we see the profile of a mountain terrain, and it is believed that the shikhar is a representation of Mount Meru or Mount Kailash, which is the heavenly abode of the god. So this is what shikhar symbolizes. And here when we enter from the Mukha Mandap, there is this beautiful toran. Even today we decorate our houses with garland of mango leaves. So it symbolizes that. So this is a toran, and toran is meant to it is considered to be auspicious. It brings good luck. So we see its frequent representation, beautiful torans on in Khajuraho temple. So now look at this part of the temple. This is the lower part of the temple. You can see the base of the temple, and the base is decorated with beautiful carvings and moldings. So now you can see like there are many moldings, and each molding has got different kind of pattern. So somewhere you see floral pattern, geometrical pattern, a pattern of elephants. Then we have representation of gods and goddesses. And here on the base level, and each molding has got a particular term, but I'm not going to give you the terms now because it becomes very complicated. But just to tell you that each part of the temple has a distinguished name. And here on the base, we have representation of Navagrahas and Ganesh and Mahishasur Mardini. So when we enter the temple complex, we see the image of Ganesh, Shani, Brihaspati, Som, Surya, Mangal, Buddha, Shukra, and finally we end up with Durga. So why this configuration? So like it is believed that Ganesh is the first god to be worshipped in a Hindu temple. So we start with Ganesh, and ultimately the devotee does a pradakshina, or he circumambulates around the temple. This is an important Hindu ritual, like going around the temple. So the circumambulation starts with Ganesh, that is the first god to be worshipped, and it ends with Durga Mahishasur Mardini. It means devotees promised that all vigna or all bad luck from his life will be removed, and he will be blessed by the great goddess. So in this whole pradakshina, actually it is meant for devotee to be protected from all evils. So this was the base part. Now I will take you to the wall part, that is Jangha part. So here again, Jangha is beautifully decorated with the sculptures, and you can see like beautiful sculptures of women, the female forms. Again, these female forms, they are called Alasya Kanya. So it is believed that they again bring merit to the building. They make it fertile, auspicious. And also we see the union of male and female in different positions. And I already told you that the Kam is one of the Purushas. So the idea is the temple conveys that a person should have a very fulfilled life. And when one is having a fulfilled life, only then the person can realize the importance of salvation or moksha. So here you can see there is this beautiful woman, and a male is taking out a thorn from her foot. So it's very interesting, the representation. He could be a doctor also, a Vaidya, who's taking out the stone, but he's so enamored by the beauty of the women that, you know, he was not a small boy, but because of the beauty and because of the aura, she controls him. So that is what is suggested. So in terms of scale, the women is shown taller than the men because he's completely mesmerized by the charm of the women. And we see the Alasya Kanyas in different postures. So what is interesting here in Khajuraho temple, like today, you know, like generally it is considered to be a very popular touristic place where we have images of erotic figures. But apart from erotic sculpture, they are only at the Sandhi. Sandhi is the place where union takes place from one part of the temple to the other. So there we see the representation of couple. And apart from that, this has got very complicated iconography of tantric form of Vaishnavism. So a lot of gods and goddesses are shown on the wall of the temples. When you go inside the Garbhagriha, now I have not shown you any sculpture in the Garbhagriha because most of the temples were not having the sculpture in the Garbhagriha, but at least we are lucky to have sculpture of Vishnu intact in the Garbhagriha of Lakshman temple. And this form of Vishnu is called Vaikuntha Vishnu. Vaikuntha Vishnu, and in this form, I'll show you the close-up. Vishnu has got three faces. So the central face is of human, the left face is of a lion, and the right face is of boar. Lion and boar are two incarnations of Vishnu, of Narasimha and Varaha. So when you see this kind of image, you should understand that the cult of Vaikuntha Vishnu started in Kashmir, and from Kashmir it became so popular that it traveled to central India. And first reference of Vaikuntha Vishnu we find in Kalhan's Raj Tarangini, which is also written in Kashmir region. And inside, so this Garbhagriha, look at this. I'll show you the plan. You also need to learn how to read the plan. So you can look at this Garbhagriha. This Garbhagriha has got an outer pradakshina path. So the devotee can go and circumambulate from outside, and he is also having an inner pradakshina path from Mukhamanda to other mandaps and Garbhagriha, and finally he comes back. And then there is another third pradakshina path which is inside, which is exactly, you know, around the Garbhagriha. So when you have so many pradakshina path, understand that each part of the temple is beautifully decorated with sculptures, and these sculptures were didactic in nature. They try to convey certain meaning to the devotee. At the time, there were no newspapers or, like, you know, computers to share information. So the temple building, the temple shared information with the devotee through these sculptures. So profusely carved with beautiful sculptures. And let's go back to that. So this is to show you the intricacy with which every part of the temple is carved with sculpture. So we have incarnations of Vishnu, we have beautiful apsaras, then we have composite figures, the vyalas, on the walls of the temple. So every inch of the Khajuraho temple is lavishly carved with sculptures, and see how far we reached in terms of development. Remember Sanchi Temple 17, where the walls were plain, only decoration was on the pillar, to Khajuraho, where each and every inch of the space is decorated with fine sculptures. So with this, I'm finishing with North Indian temple architecture. Now I'm taking you to Western India, and here I would like you to be familiar with a different style of temple, and this is cave temples. And I'm bringing in India's got some very fine cave temples, and I'm talking here about the Elephanta caves. This is again a World Heritage Site. It is near Bombay. And when you go inside this cave, this is the plan of the site you encounter. So we have a Garbhagriha, and this Garbhagriha is within a mandap, a pillared mandap. And what is interesting here is that this Garbhagriha, usually we have one focus. Like, we enter from the west and ultimately go at the end of the hall to offer prayer in the Garbhagriha. But here we have a Garbhagriha where Shiva is shown in his aniconic form of a linga. And then we have another focus where we have image of Shiva in iconic form, that is in human form. And here you see a sculpture of three-faced Shiva. Then there is a great many sculpture in this cave, a total of 9 panels, very fine panels. So on the southern side we have 3. Let's go back. So this is to tell you the plan. So on the southern side we have 3 sculptures. Sadashiv, which is the main sculpture of Elephanta. It is flanked by Shiva, descent of Ganga, then Shiva as Ardhanarishwar, and so forth. Like, so these sculptures deal with various forms of Shiva. We are going to see some of the sculptures which are in good state of preservation. You can see Elephanta cave has also damaged in course of time. So Indian heritage is having like a lot of threat. One is also vandalism, but then also the environmental regions, which leads to the destruction of the temples and its sculptures. But here I'll show you some sculpture from this cave temple which are worth admiring. And this is Shiva as Sadashiv, and you can see the central face has a meditative quality about it. It's very peaceful and inward looking. On the left side is a female face, and it is indicated by the soft curls. You can see the soft curls. It's beautifully decorated, and the lips. And she holds a flower. And on the right, and on the right side, we have image of Aghor, Bhairav, which is the ferocious aspect of Shiva. So here is the benign, the soft and beautiful aspect of Shiva. Here is ferocious and angry aspect of Shiva. And finally, these two opposite ideas, they neutralizes in the central meditative phase, which is peaceful. So actually in the world of Shiva, opposite can coexist. So it's a beautiful philosophy in Shaivism, like, which talks about coexistence of opposites. Then we have this image of Ardhanarishwar. And again, this image is very important. It tells you about a very fundamental aspect of Indian culture, which talks about unity of and equality of male and female forms. Unfortunately, today there is a lot of gender biases, but when you look into the very foundation of the religion, Shiva and Shakti, the male and female aspects were given equal importance. They are not complete without the other, without each other. So here we see Shiva and Parvati are combined in one form. So the left side is of Uma, Shiva's consort, and you can see she is shown with elongated hand. Her hips are protruding outward, and she is shown with in this form Shiva is shown with a single breast. Whereas on the left side, Shiva is the male part of Shiva and is shown leaning on Nandi. Then we have this very interesting sculpture of Shiva as Gangadhar. And if you know the story, it was believed that at one point of time there was no water on the earth, and Bhagirath prayed to Lord Shiva for many years so that goddess Ganga, could come to the earth. And previously, goddess Ganga was residing in heavens. So here is the figure of Bhagirath, and Shiva was happy with Bhagirath's prayer, and he decides to take Ganga in his hair locks before she descends on the earth, because it was believed that the force of Ganga is so strong that if she comes directly to the earth will be shattered into pieces. So Shiva agrees to collect Ganga first in his matted locks. So now you see here above we have representation of Ganga. She is coming from the heaven and going to reside in Shiva's matted locks. But what happens when Ganga comes? Parvati is upset. Shiva's consort is upset. Why? It's very interesting that, you know, she was not happy with the idea that her husband is paying attention to another woman. So it's quite interesting, you know, so like these are like divine plays. And here you see she's upset, so she's going away from Shiv. But also artists try to convey that this separation between Shiv and Parvati are temporary. And you can see from one of his hand, though it's broken, Shiva is trying to bring Parvati towards himself. So in the middle part, they are going away from each other, but from the upper part and the lower part, they're coming together. So this is like, you know, even present day husband-wife fight. For instance, those fights are very temporary in nature. So ultimately there is a divine love between the couple. So very beautifully the human emotions are captured in the realm of Shiva. Then this is again a very beautiful representation of Kalyan Sundar, and I told you Kalyan Sundar is that form of Shiva where he is shown marrying Parvati. So you can see Shiva is the divine groom, bridegroom, and here is beautiful form of Parvati. She is shy, so her face is downcast, but at the same time, you know, she's also eager for the union and become the consort of Shiva, and that is indicated by her protruding hip, which is taking her towards the Shiva. And behind Parvati is her father Himalaya. He is offering Parvati in the wedding. So this is a beautiful representation of Kanyadan. And then behind Himalaya, this figure with a pot of water is the moon god, Chandrama, who is assisting Himalaya in the divine wedding of Shiva and Parvati. And who is a priest? The Pandit here is none but Brahma himself, the creator god. So Shiva is the divine lover of Parvati, but artist also tells you that Shiva is also the ferocious and the destroyer of the evils. And here we see a very powerful representation of Andaksur Vadhamurti. So in this form, you can see Shiva, though it's a broken image, you can see the sculpture is quite damaged, but you can see the intensity with which artists try to show might of Shiva, who is about to vanquish the demon. The lower part has not survived. So what I wanted to suggest through some of the sculpture is that here artists try to convey the coexistence of opposites. Shiva is a divine lover of Parvati, and at the same time, he is the most powerful god who destroys all the evils. He is. And this idea was again, and also the sculpture tried to show the importance of both Shakti cult and Shiva cult. So male and female were given equal importance in the pantheon. Now from Bombay, let us go to Tamil Nadu. So from Arabian Sea, we are moving towards the Bay of Bengal. We are covering quite a lot in terms of geographical extent in this class. So here we have the Ratha temple from Tamil Nadu. And this is in Mahabalipuram, and this is again considered is a World Heritage Site. So at this site we have many temples, caves and sculptures, but I'm going to talk about a group of 5 temples, which is named after 5 Pandav brothers, the heroes of Mahabharata. So this is a group of 5 temples, and why they are important? Because they are carved out of a single boulder of rock. So it's a rock. The temple itself is like a sculpture. So now look at this temple. When you look at its form, so this is how temple architecture evolved. This is from the early period, like 6th century, and you can see earlier the temples were in the form of a village hut. And since this temple is dedicated to goddess Durga, we see also the image of Durga Mahishasura. So here Durga is standing on the buffalo head of the demon. These temples also tells us about the various practices and lifestyle that prevailed during that time. And here, when you go inside the Garbhagriha, when you go inside this temple, from this door, we go inside the temple. And on the back wall, we have representation of goddess Durga and also of a man who is sacrificing himself. So we know that during Pallava period, the human sacrifice was still prevalent. So here is like a man who is offering his head to goddess Durga. Now this is another type of temple from South India. And this is called Kuta type of temple. What is interesting here is that, can you look at this? Originally, this was a temple, which is like a village hut. But gradually, temple becomes much more complex, and this structure becomes only a decorative motif. So here, you can see now, the smaller miniature shrines are decorating the superstructure of the temple. And this is how the South Indian temples are different from North Indian temples. North Indian temples have curvy linear profile. I'll just show you what I mean. Like you can see, it progresses in a straight line which tapers upward, whereas South Indian temples have pyramidal profile, and there are multiple stories. There are several stories, and in South India, these stories are called talas, and the topmost part is called shikhar. Whereas in North India, the entire body of the superstructure from Varandika onwards was considered as the shikhar. So in Mahabalipuram, we find a lot of temples which are still incomplete, but these are very important remains which tells you the method of construction. So when you look at these temples, this is called Bhimarath. The first one was called Draupadi Rath, which was Draupadi was wife of Pandav brothers. Second is Arjun Rath, it is square in plan, and the third is called Bhimarath. But when you look into the Bhimarath, it is rectangular in plan. And though its lower part is not complete, lower part is not complete, we see since it is rectangular in plan, probably it was meant for Anant Shayan Vishnu. That is Vishnu reclining on the cosmic serpent, Anant, sleeping form of Vishnu. And for that, you need a rectangular building. The tallest temple in this group was is called Dharmaraj Rath, and Dharmaraj was a term used for Yudhishthir, the eldest Pandav brother. So here again we see the superstructure has got multiple stories and it is decorated with miniature shrines. And this is the early stage, but this remains a typical feature of South Indian temple architecture, that the stories are decorated with architectural motifs called Koot and Chala. And you can see the fifth temple in this group. This is called Nakul Sahadev Rath, and it is related to the last two brothers of Pandavas. And what is interesting here is, can you see the profile of the temple? It's very interesting. It's apsidal in plan. That is called Gaj Prikshakriti. It resembles back of the elephant. And this form was originally meant for Buddhist temples, but we also see it in Hindu temple architecture. Then I'm taking you to a relief panel of descent of Ganga from Mahabalipuram. And you remember the representation in Elephanta. And here is a very different representation, and this is a beauty of art. It's not static, you know, every region has got its own way to express a particular subject. So here you can see descent of Ganga, and it's a huge boulder, and above that boulder was a tank. So this tank was filled with water, and water would descend to symbolize the descent of Ganga. And how do we know that Ganga has arrived? We know it because of these Nagas. And I told you that Nag and Nagini symbolizes water. So they are coming upwards with folded hands. So they're coming to welcome Goddess Ganga to earth. And here is the penance. I told you, like, Bhagirath practiced penance for many years in praise of Lord Shiva. So Shiva has come to give him boon that Ganga, he will take Ganga in his meted law. And we see finally Ganga has arrived. But this is also a beautiful sculpture. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see here? This part. Here is a cat. She is also performing penance like that of Bhagirath. And around her are many rats. So artist has taken his creative license to tell the devotee that not all ascetics are Bhagirath. There are frauds also, and it is very pertinent in today's context. Like, you know, we know a lot of sadhus who ultimately end up in doing a lot of corruption and in vices. So as early as 7th century, artist is warning the devotee that don't consider all ascetic as Bhagirath. Be vigilant, because if you remember, there was this old cat who could not fetch rats. So she practices penance, and the rats thought that she has become a very pious person. So they come to worship her, and gradually she ends up eating them all. So there is a warning for the devotee. This is another sculpture from Mahabalipuram, and this is of Mahishasura where Mahishasura is very important form. It's frequently seen in Hindu temple architecture, both in North India and in South India. And again, this is a masterpiece, you know, because we never see, like, you know, usually we see that Durga has already killed the demon. But here in this sculpture, we are seeing the fight, the combat between the forces of goddess Durga and the forces of the demon king Mahishasur. Now, what is interesting here is that the artist has given equal respect to Mahishasura because he was a powerful king. So you can see Durga is provided with a chhatra or umbrella to mark her divinity, to mark her royalty. And also the demon king Mahishasura was provided with an umbrella. So he is also an worth fighting. A demon who was powerful enough to be an enemy of goddess Durga. Now you can look at her. How the defeat is conveyed. Durga's forces are coming forward, while though the demon king is much more powerful in terms of his physical appearance, but he is taking a retreat. He's going backwards. So very beautifully, artist has conveyed the defeat of Mahishasura, and goddess retinue also includes female warriors. We see the female warriors as well. Now from Mahabalipuram, I will take you to we are not left with much time, so I'll try to wrap up as soon as possible. So I'm taking you to Kailash Nath temple at Kanchipuram, and Kanchipuram was the capital of Pallav rulers. Mahabalipuram was also constructed by Pallav rulers, and Kanchipuram was the main center of Pallav rulers. So here I'm not going into the detail, but I would like to tell you one new feature coming into the South Indian temple architecture. The temples are surrounded by an enclosure. It's a very important feature. And gradually you can see there was this second layer of enclosure which was about to come, but it was never completed. So you will see gradually in South Indian temples, like, you know, around the main temple grew many concentric temples. And these are entered by monumental gateways called gopuras. So and the best example is Meenakshi temple. So you know, like, so the sometimes main temple becomes smaller, and the extensions of the temple building becomes much more prominent and bigger. Kailash Nath temple. This is the interior of the temple. You have the garbhagriha and a mandap. And you can see here, this is a later development. So this does not go with the whole body. So a plain wall was added between the two structures so that they becomes one continuous unit. This temple is world famous for these beautiful chubby ganas. And this is again dedicated to Lord Shiva and the Shiva's retinue. Shiva's retinue were composed of various ganas. So here we can see them jumping around. Then, since it's a Shiva temple, we have different representation of Shiva. So here is Shiva as a Dakshinamurti, where Shiva is a teacher. So in this form, Shiva is a teacher and his locks are shown open. This is representation of Shiva Gangadhar. I have shown you two beautiful sculptures from Elephanta and from Mahabalipuram, and this is a third representation where Shiva is extending his hair lock to receive goddess Ganga. Now, this is a superstructure, and this is how we distinguish between North Indian and South Indian temples. So I told you that South Indian temples will have curvy linear profile, and it's various stories. So these are like stories are decorated with architectural motifs, so the square motifs and the rectangular motifs, and these are called Koot and Shala. So I'm not going into the details, but each part has got its own name. This temple was originally also painted, so we found some traces of painting. There are many inscriptions and there are political connotations also related to these temples. We may discuss that later on. But from there, from Tamil Nadu, let us move to Karnataka. And this Karnataka temple is this is one of the very famous temple from Karnataka. It's called Virupaksha temple in Pattadakal. Again, it's a UNESCO's World Heritage Site. So you can see here, as we have seen in Kanchipuram temple, there is a Prakara wall or enclosure wall It is also dedicated to Lord Shiva. And we also see here the Gopuras, the emergence of monumental gateways on the temple building. This temple is modeled on Kailashnath Kanchipuram temple. It is inspired from the temple which I just discussed. And Chalukyas and Pallavas were constantly fighting with each other. And usually when one king defeats other king, they take the wealth of the temple, because temples were rich institutions. So the victorious king would take the wealth of the temple. But Vikramaditya was so enamored by beauty of Kailashnath Kanchipuram temple that he allowed the wealth to remain with the temple. And when he comes back to his own kingdom, he asked his wife Lok Mahadevi to get a temple constructed similar to the temple he saw in Tamil Nadu. So stylistically, it has got features both of North India and South India. South Indian feature primarily is in the delineation of the superstructure, that is the pyramidal shikhar, and also the enclosure wall. But when we look into the moldings are similar to what we see in North Indian temple architecture. So since it's a Shiva temple, we found a lot of sculpture dedicated to various aspects of Shiva. I will show you some of the slides. So now look into this. So this is a 3-story temple. So 1, 2, and 3. And we know these stories through the architectural motif of Koot and Shala. This temple is one of the temples where we also see representation of Mahabharata on the pillars. So they are very, very, very small, minute details on the pillar we see, and they represent various episodes from Mahabharata. And here, again, we have a very beautiful sculpture of Durga Mahishasur Mardini. It is considered to be one of the masterpieces in Indian art, where you can see Goddess Durga killing the demon. And I'm sorry if the slide is not very clear, but what is happening here is that the demon was transforming. He's transforming from his animal form to human form. So the message is that when the demon was killed by Goddess Durga, actually he attains salvation. He was not killed in an accident or in an ordinary manner, but killed by great goddess Durga himself. So ultimately, at the end, the demon also realizes the mistake, and he transforms from his animal form to the human form. So this is the last temple I am dealing in this class. This is called Rajarajeshwar Temple. A masterpiece in terms of its architectonics. It talks about India's great achievement in the field of architecture. When you look into its sheer scale and elegant carving. In fact, Discovery Channel has made a film on it. So when you look into that film, you realize how perfect it was in terms of architectural achievement. So when you look at this temple complex, it's a huge complex, and you see, but it's compared to other temples, it's less decorated. Here, the main focus was on bringing out an architecture which was never seen previously. So you have the main temple, then we enter the main temple complex by the Gopuras, the monumental entrances. Let me take you inside. So can you see this temple? My slides will not do justice to it. It's a huge temple, And abhi tak, whatever I have shown you so far, we have temples like 3-story temples, 4-story temples, but this is 14-story temple. 14 stories. Huge temples, and there is no binding material used. So they are standing because of the gravity. The stone blocks are just, it's made in trapeze system. It is kept one above the other in such a scientific manner then that it is still intact, after 1,000 years. And we know about this temple quite well because the entire body on the base, along on all four sides of the temple, we have found inscription which talks about the history of the temple from its foundation to its completion. And you can look at it like, since it's a Shiva temple, and in Shiva's temple, one of the important ritual is to offer water to Shivaling. So here the water is collected outside in a small tank, and then it was distributed among the devotees. When you look at the wall of this temple, it's very interesting. It is two-storied. Lower story has got different incarnation of Shiva, and upper story has got only one form of Shiva, repeated 23 times. And this is Shiva as Tripuranta. And I will just tell you the story behind that form. So this is upper story, I told you, and there's only one form. And probably here Raja was trying to equate himself also with Shiva. And the story is that the Shiva has defeated demons of the three cities, of the three worlds, of heaven, earth, and netherworld, by a single arrow. And similarly, if you know about Raja Chola, he was a very powerful king. He attacked Sri Lanka, brought many parts under his control. His navy attacked Indonesia, formed colony over there. Then he reached up to Ganga in the North India. So he has a huge empire, very well established huge empire. So probably this form of Shiva, through this form, he was Raja Chola was also talking about his own achievement, and that's why probably it was repeated 23 times. Now, notice some facts. Then you will realize the importance of this structure. It's 14-storied, so the height is 60 meters. It's a very tall temple. It's pyramidal profile. You can see it's a very neat pyramidal profile. Then on the top we have a kalash, and this part, the shikhar, it weighs 80 tons. So at that time, when you don't have any crane to lift the weight, Raja Chola constructed a ramp which was very long and stretched to several villages. And this 80-ton kalash was taken on the elephant back. They went up to the top to put it over the superstructure. So great architectural achievement, in terms of it was a kind of architectural marvel of the time. And this is what makes it also the World Heritage Site. Now I'm concluding my lecture with this image of Nataraj. You may have seen this image, like it's one of the masterpieces of Indian art, and frequently Indian art is associated with it. So this is called Nataraj, and this is a very interesting image, because in this one image, you see the 5 acts of creation, In this divine dance, Shiva conveys creation, which is symbolized by this Damaru. Protection, which is symbolizes by this Abhayhast, that is he is saying that the devotee would be protected. Dissolution, which is symbolized by the fire. Can you see the fire? So Shiva is also the god of destruction. Tirudhan, that is ignorance. So here is this dwarf which symbolizes ignorance. So Shiva destroys ignorance, and if you come and worship Shiva, he is certainly going to bestow grace on the devotee. So creation, protection, and destruction, all is symbolized by the cyclic dance of Shiva. And so these are the symbols. So like the damaru, the drum symbolizes creation, fire, dissolution. The Apasmara Purush, this dwarf, is symbol of ignorance, and Abhayhasta, a symbol of protection, and grace is suggested by the lifted hand and the pointed arm. So Shiva is the great god. He is involved in this whole act of creation and destruction is under his control. So Parvati is no less. If Shiva is a Tripurantar, that is, he can kill the demons of the three world by a single shot. Parvati or Shivakami is the most beautiful. Tripura Sundari. So nobody is as beautiful as her in the three world. So always, this Nataraj image or the bronze sculptures are seen in the group. So you have the whole family together. So Shiva is also shown with Parvati, and the pantheon includes Ganesh and Kartikeya as well. And unlike these temples, the stone sculpture which remains inside the temple all the time, the bronze sculptures or the metal sculptures, they are considered as Chalamurti, and they are taken out in procession during the festivals. So the divine grace does not remain limited to the Garbhagriha, but through these sculptures, it is spread all over the world. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Now it's open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samita. It was wonderful presentation, and ma'am has taken examples from all over the country, from all directions. She has described about the different period and features from different temples which prevail in our country. Now it is the time to make our queries. We can see the faces of teachers. They are very happy. Clappings we are getting from teachers about each of the symbols shown by ma'am. And we invite now your queries, gentlemen. Teachers, आप अपने queries ma'am से बातें करें, पूछें. You may ask your queries. Most welcome.
Ma'am, hats off to you. You continued in only one throw. It was just amazing to listen to you and come to know about our temples, the stories which you have described us. We are very thrilled to know. My question is that when we talk about children about first to fifth class, how we can uh, combine them with our rich heritage?
The children are very inquisitive. They want to learn a lot, and the story, the temples, or any building for that matter, they have a lot of stories in it. So you can adopt this story mode and also the picture mode to impart education in the rich heritage. And like, for instance, like festivals. When we talk about Dashera festival, for instance, so like one can talk about like how the Durga Mahishasura Mardini, which they see in their surrounding, they were also depicted previously, and the forms changed. So I think kids like to look into the images also, and they respond more to the visuals rather than the text. And so heritage is available in the visual form, so you can use it, show more and more pictures through your presentations, and also the stories are very important, because even like when you are talking about like say Taj Mahal, or you are talking about dynastic history, so like if we impart it instead of dates, if we impart it in the mode of a story, or talking about certain inspirational event of a particular ruler's life or a particular period, they would certainly be interested. If I answered your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Hello. Nice
Yes.
presentation. I am glad to listen your presentation here. Yeah, I want to ask one question that, as you had stated earlier only that we early didn't have the written our notes in the here. That मतलब हमारे पास में पहले जो भी हमारा जो भी डेवलपमेंट हुआ लिटरेचर आर्ट्स या किसी भी फील्ड में, तो उसका जो हमारे पास रिटन डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं है, और जो वेस्टर्न कल्चर्स है या फिर जो भी है, तो उन्होंने रिटन डॉक्यूमेंट करके उन्होंने अपने आप को बड़ा दिखाया और हमें हमारे जो इंडियन कल्चर है उन्हें छोटा दिखाया या फिर किसी तरह से सप्रेस करने की कोशिश किया। अभी अगर हम लोग अपनी जो बात को अगर बच्चों के सामने किसी भी तरह से प्रेजेंट करते हैं, तो उसको जो हम लोग का ये जो लॉजिकल पॉइंट होगा कि हम लोग जो कह रहे हैं ये सही है, इसको अगर हम किस तरह से अगर उनके सामने प्रेजेंट करें तो सही होगा। इसके बारे में एक छोटा सा आभास अगर आप दे सके तो थोड़ा सा आसान होता हमारे लिए।
देखिए, ये बात तो एक कॉलोनियल पीरियड, आपकी बात बहुत सही है, यू नो लाइक, क्योंकि हमारा जो एजुकेशनल जो प्रेजेंट मॉडल ऑफ एजुकेशन है वो वेस्टर्न मॉडल पर आधारित है। और जब वेस्टर्नर्स पहली बार आए और द होल आइडिया जो विक्टोरिया का 1857 के बाद जब उन्होंने कंट्रोल किया इस लैंड को, तो जो पहला जो शुरुआत है ना, आप किसी को कंट्रोल करते हैं, गलत करते हैं, तभी आपको जस्टिफाई करना पड़ता है कि नहीं हमने गलत नहीं किया। उनका कहना था कि ये इसलिए कंट्रोल किया गया क्योंकि ये जो लोग हैं वो जंगली लोग हैं, ये जाहिल लोग हैं, और इनका कर्तव्य है कि जो वेस्ट में प्रोग्रेस हुआ है ना, वो भारतीय या बाकी जो कॉलोनीज हैं वो इसको इम्पार्ट करें। तो पहले तो वो आपका विश्वास तोड़ेंगे कि आपके पास जो था वो सब खराब था, उसके बाद फिर वो अपना कुछ प्रेजेंट करने की कोशिश करेंगे। वो साइकी अभी भी रही है हमारी, मगर आज के दौर में अभी भी है, खैर बायसेस तो अभी भी है, बट यू नो अगर हम ये विश्वास करें कि अगर हमारा कल्चर है, अगर हमारा मैं कल्चर के सेक्टर की बात करती हूँ क्योंकि ये मेरा एक्सपर्टीज है, तो हम इसको ज्यादा अच्छी तरीके से समझते हैं। आज भी अगर आप लिटरेचर को लेंगे तो हम बड़े ही गर्व के साथ वेस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स को कोट करते हैं और अपने स्कॉलर्स को कोट भी नहीं करते हैं। एक तो प्रॉब्लम खैर कहीं ना कहीं हमारी स्कॉलरशिप में भी रही है, हम शायद उतना प्रिसीजन से काम जितना करना चाहिए उतना कई बार नहीं करते, मगर एट द सेम टाइम जो हमारा कल्चरल हेरिटेज है एविडेंसेस के साथ, डॉक्यूमेंट्स के साथ हमसे अच्छा कोई प्रेजेंट नहीं कर सकता, वो आत्मविश्वास होना चाहिए हमारे पास। तो अगर आप आज का समय है उसमें मैं देखती हूँ कि लोग भी अगर आपकी बात को एविडेंस के साथ सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं तो आपकी बात जरूर सुना जाएगा। लेकिन मुश्किल तो है, मुश्किल तो एक बायस है, ऑलरेडी बायस है, दैट इज देयर। बट आज के टाइम में वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड भी कोशिश कर रहा है एटलीस्ट पार्शियली दिखाने का कि भाई हम वी आर ओपन टू द डिस्कोर्सेस। तो मैं एक एग्जांपल आपको देती हूँ टीपू सुल्तान का, बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है। मैं टीपू सुल्तान का अगर आप कॉलोनियल राइटिंग में पढ़ें या उनके जो इमेजेस देखें जो ब्रिटिशर्स ने बनाया, उसको बड़ा डिमीन करते हैं। मगर आज के समय जब आज का परिवेश, अगर 21वीं शताब्दी का परिवेश हम ले और जब बीबीसी टीपू सुल्तान के बारे में लिखते हैं तो वो उनको एज अ नेशनल हीरो प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं। तो कहीं ना कहीं बदलाव वेस्ट में भी आया है।
यस, रिसेंटली अभी उनके टीपू सुल्तान के बिलोंगिंग्स के बारे में जो कुछ भी आया था, उनका ऑक्शन भी हुआ था उनका यह और दिखाया गया था, तो उसके बारे में मैंने ये नोटिस किया था। तो उस समय अभी प्रेजेंटेशन का व्यू थोड़ा चेंज हुआ है मैडम
जी। तो लेकिन उसको और बदलने की जरूरत है, उसमें आपका बहुत बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रोल है, क्योंकि जो टीचर है, स्कूल टीचर, वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। देखिए उनसे इम्पोर्टेंट तो मुझे लगता है कोई कम्युनिटी नहीं है, और वो फाउंडेशन रखते हैं देश का। तो वो जो माइंडसेट है ना, जो आत्मविश्वास है, वो आप ही जगा सकते हैं बच्चों में। फिर ये जनरेशन जो तैयार होगी वो अपनी बात को बड़े ही क्वालिटी के साथ दुनिया के सामने रख पाएगी। तो उसमें मुझसे ज्यादा रोल आपका है।
थैंक यू मैडम फॉर द क्लियरिफिकेशन।
संतोष सर, मैम मैं कुछ ऐड भी करना चाहूंगा इसमें। मैम ने बहुत अच्छे से रिप्लाई दिया कि जो ब्रिटिश टाइम था हमारा, एक्चुअली कुछ आईसीएस ऑफिसर्स थे ब्रिटिश, और वो आईसीएस ऑफिसर्स हमारे इंडियन आईसीएस ऑफिसर्स को ट्रेनिंग देते थे। इन लोगों ने बिल्कुल अपने मन में बना लिया कि हम हारे हुए लोग हैं, इंडियंस जो है वो वॉरियर्स नहीं है, ना ही वो इंटेलेक्चुअल हैं, मैम ने जैसे एक्सप्लेन किया। और उन लोगों ने उसी तरीके से हिस्ट्री का प्रीएम्बल लिखना शुरू कर दिया। तो आप देखेंगे कि जब भी भारत किसी लड़ाई में गया, हम भाई साहब हार गए, हम सभी लड़ाइयों में हार गए, ये कैसे संभव है? अगर आप रीजनल हिस्ट्री जब उठाते हैं, सर संतोष असम को बिलोंग करते हैं, मैं देख पा रहा हूं उनके स्क्रीन पे, सर लाक्षित बरफुकन को इंडियन हिस्ट्री में हाईलाइट नहीं किया गया। लाक्षित बरफुकन ने हजारों बार दुश्मनों को धूल चटाई अपने क्षेत्र में, सही कह रहा हूं मैं, लेकिन उनके हिस्ट्री को राष्ट्रीय स्तर पे हम नहीं लाए। सेम तमिलनाडु के हिस्ट्री को हम नहीं लाए। कारण क्या था? आउटसाइडर्स हमारी हिस्ट्री लिख रहे थे। तो अभी अभी मैंने सोशल मीडिया में भी पेपर देखा, और जो प्रेजेंट गवर्नमेंट है इस मैटर को मैम डॉक्टर सविता बहुत सीरियसली ले रही है, ये गवर्नमेंट, तो हम सब फॉर्चुनेट हैं। अभी हाल ही में पार्लियामेंट्री स्टैंडिंग कमेटी है जिसके अंदर में इंटेलेक्चुअल से, स्कॉलर्स से, टीचर्स से सजेशन मांगे गए हैं कि क्या चीज डिलीट हो सकता है, कहाँ पे हमारे कल्चर को गलत रिफ्लेक्ट किया गया है, कहाँ पे सही सही इंडियन हिस्ट्री को नहीं दिखाया गया है। ये सारे पार्लियामेंट में कलेक्शन भी हो रहे हैं। आप काइंडली उन पेपर्स को ढूंढें, उसमें अपने वैल्यूएबल सजेशंस दें। संतोष जी ने बहुत जेन्युइन क्वेश्चन उठाया, थैंक यू सो मच सर आपके इस क्वेश्चन के लिए और मैम आपके रिप्लाई के लिए। वी कैन टेक अनदर लास्ट क्वेश्चन बिकॉज ऑफ द टाइम लिमिटेशन। एक और क्वेश्चन जेन्युइन हम लेते हैं, ऐसे संतोष जी की तरफ पूछिए कोई।
ये बोलना चाहती थी कि मैं जैसे पढ़ा, मैं गुजरात से बिलोंग करती हूँ। जब भी पढ़ाते हैं अभी के बच्चे को, पहले की बात नहीं करती, उन लोग को हमारे जो महाभारत है, रामायण है, उसके आधे पात्र के बारे में भी इतना पता नहीं है। तो मैं सोच रही हूँ कि फर्स्ट स्टैंडर्ड से ही थोड़ा थोड़ा इन्वॉल्व कर दिया जाए, जैसे कि गीता, वो हमारा ग्रंथ है, तो वो बच्चों के लिए बहुत अच्छा रहेगा।
जी, आपकी बात सही है कि वही जो अभी सर ने भी कहा कि वो जो मोटिवेशनल स्टोरीज हैं, जो अच्छी बातें हमारे शास्त्रों में हैं, उसको जरूर शुरुआत से ही अगर हम इनकलकेट करें बच्चों को, उनको अगर पता चले कि भाई ये सब कुछ ऑलरेडी हमारे यहाँ है, चाहे वो मैं आपका शायद आपका क्वेश्चन कंटिन्यूड है बट मैं सुन नहीं पा रही। हरिता बहन जी
ऐसा, हाँ हेलो मैम, मेरी बात है, मैंने आगे भी मैं उसमें मैसेज भी किया है, जो एनसीईआरटी की जो टीम है उसमें भी मैंने मैसेज ड्रॉप किया है कि जैसे हम बोलते हैं कि छोटे बच्चों को जितना हम पहले से उसमें जो बीज बोए वो उसके लिए अच्छा रहेगा। तो हम हमारी संस्कृति की हम लोग सब जब बात करते हैं लेकिन बात ही रह जाती है, उससे कोई इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं होता। तो मैं ऐसा, मेरा एक सजेशन है कि जैसे फर्स्ट स्टैंडर्ड के बच्चे को हम वो हमारा जो ग्रंथ है, गीता है, भगवत गीता है, रामायण है, महाभारत, उसके छोटे छोटे उसमें इन्वॉल्व करते जाएं, तो बच्चे जब 10th तक आएंगे ना, उसको पूरा आ गया होगा, तो संस्कृति अच्छी ही रहेगी। नो प्रॉब्लम
मैम,
नो प्रॉब्लम।
मैम हरिता बहन मैम, अगर आप रीजनल सिलेबस को देखें स्कूल्स में, जैसे मैं एक एग्जांपल लूं, आप सुन सकती हैं मुझे?
यस सर
जी, अगर हम एग्जांपल लें केंद्रीय विद्यालय में, मैंने देखा कि 6 क्लास में महाभारत है और क्लास 7 में रामायण है, पूरा डिस्क्रिप्टिव है, एक पूरा बुक फॉर्म में है, छोटे उसको समराइज किया हुआ है। तो इसी तरीके से अगर हम रीजनल चीजों को भी लें, और ओबियस आप जो कह रहे हैं, हमारे जो वेद शास्त्र रामायण और गीता है, उनको अगर क्लासेस में शामिल किया जाए तो वो वैल्यू प्रोपेगेट हो पाएगा जो हम चाहते हैं कि हमारे बच्चे वो वैल्यूज लेके चलें। बिल्कुल आप सही कह रहे हैं मैम। यहाँ से वोट ऑफ थैंक्स की ओर जाएंगे मैम के लिए, और फिर आगे की कल की तैयारी रहेगी। आप लोगों से रिक्वेस्ट है, क्योंकि मैम सडन डिस्कनेक्ट हो गई, किसी शायद बाय मिस्टेक कोई बटन या क्लिक हो गया होगा। आप लोग इंश्योर करें आप लोगों का अटेंडेंस पूरे 5 डेज का हो, ठीक है? सर्टिफिकेट उसके अकॉर्डिंग अलॉट होता है जब 5 डेज आपके अटेंडेंस हमारे साथ में होते हैं, ठीक है? तो आप इंश्योर करें अपने अटेंडेंस को।
सर मैं सुन सकती हूँ आपको?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now we are coming to the last ritual for today, that is presenting vote of thanks. Ma'am, on behalf of this huge assembly, that more than 200 teachers from more than 10 states and union territory and CCRT, we heartily present our gratitude and thanks to you for your wonderful presentation on the subject Sculpture and Architectural Heritage of India, Thank you being with us, ma'am. And we are also thankful to all participants for your active participation during the program. Thank you everyone. See you tomorrow with Sarvodharm Prarthana sharp by 9:30. Thank you everyone.